Welcome, everybody. This is the December meeting of our nonprofit plant-based nutrition organization of Wisconsin, or we like to call it PB Now. I'm your host, Terry Lynch. The mission of our nonprofit group here is to educate, inspire, and support each other on an evidence-backed, whole plant food-based nutritional path for health and improved quality of life. Our group is open to everyone, those plant-based, those just curious about it. It's meant to be a non-judgmental place to come, get information, inspiration, and support. If you'd like more information about our group, our upcoming meeting dates, speakers, and resources, or just to check out videos of prior meetings, just Google us at pbnow.org. That's pbnow.org. As we do each time, can I see a show of hands, either by raising your hand if your video's on, which is nice. People leave your videos on. Those who feel comfortable with it, it's that much warmer of an atmosphere then. Or a thumbs up if you are currently following a plant-based lifestyle. It's a good number. That's probably about almost half of the group here. That's great. As we mentioned at the beginning of each meeting, the evidence of the benefits of plant-based nutrition in improving health and quality of life for all ages, as published in non-biased medical research, is quite striking. Whether it's improving health through increased energy, weight loss, preventing, slowing, stopping, or reversing problems like allergies, digestive problems, diabetes, heart disease, and early dementia, or increasing our quality of life by helping us feel better quickly, strengthening our immune system, increasing our endurance, improving athletic performance, speeding recovery from exercise, reducing joint pain, clearing thinking, or reducing the physical, emotional, and financial side effects of the illnesses, drugs, and procedures often recommended to treat the conditions plant-based nutrition can help us avoid. The research shows that our bodies do a wonderful job of healing themselves if we just stop damaging them daily with poor nutrition and start giving them the nutrition that they need to heal, to function optimally, and to give us a chance to enjoy each day that we have left. It's truly remarkable. Now, let me tell you what's in store for you tonight. Tonight, we'll hear from two speakers. Our first speaker will be our PB Now Medical Director, Dr. Josh Liberman, who will share with us some of his thoughts. Our featured speaker tonight will be plant-based health coach Michele Stamn, who will talk to us about getting started with a plant-based diet. Tonight's program should end about 7:30. As a reminder, we have meetings every month, usually on the second Thursday of the month at 6 Central Time. Next month, on January 11th, our featured speaker will be a familiar one to some of you, and one of our favorites. It's cancer survivor and registered dietitian Allison Tierney. In the future, we'll be hearing from a number of excellent speakers. Among them is Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn, and Dr. Michael Greger will be coming up later this year. We'll be posting more information about our next meeting and other upcoming meetings on our website, pbnow.org. If you register on the website or are already registered, you'll get email reminders of our events as they approach. And last, a quick technical note, during the meeting, everyone but the speakers will be muted, and we ask you to stay that way to avoid background noise and allow everyone to hear the speakers. All right, here we go. Our first speaker tonight is a fellowship-trained cardiologist. He is president and CEO of Wisconsin Cardiology Associates. He's a past president and current trustee of the Wisconsin chapter of the American College of Cardiology. He's a member of the American College of Cardiology's National Nutrition and Lifestyle Work Group, whose membership includes nationally known physicians such as Dr. Dean Ornish, Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn, Dr. Neil Bernard. He's an advocate for the use of plant-based nutrition to help improve heart health, general health, and quality of life, and has seen the benefits of plant-based nutrition in both his personal life and that of his patients. We are fortunate to have him here in Milwaukee and as our PB Now Medical Director. I'm happy to welcome Dr. Joshua Liberman. Dr. Liberman?
Thank you, Terry. Thank you, as always, for the kind introduction. Thank you, everyone, for joining us on this dark, dark night. The good news is that in just 7 days, we will, well, I guess it's not good news, that in 7 days, we reach the shortest day of the year, right? December 21st will be the shortest day of the year. But the good news is that in 8 days, we start getting longer days. That's the beauty of it, right? So on December 22nd, we start increasing the length of the days, and hopefully we'll get we'll get some light back in our lives pretty quickly. So thank you all for being with me. Sorry I couldn't be with you last month, um, but as many of you know, so first of all, I don't want to take up too much time because I want Michele to be able to have plenty of time to talk to y'all. And you guys, I'm sure, sometimes get tired of hearing me anyway. But as many of you know, what I like to do is talk about two kind of general things. One is kind of a patient experience from my own practice, and then also just a quick review maybe of some literature, some research studies that have come out. And so I'm going to do something a little bit different about the patient experience discussion. And actually, Terry, are you able to let me share the screen? Can you give that responsibility?
Yep, I'll do that. Give me just a few seconds here.
Sure thing. So what I want to do is I had a patient that came by fairly recently. Great. And he had made a change to being more plant-based. Now, as many of you know, I am not a zealot in terms of everybody who comes to see me absolutely 100% has to be plant-based. Or if I tell them they have to be 100% plant-based, then that's all they have to do. So my whole approach is that certainly I think that that's the ideal diet, and I think we shall strive to that. But not everybody can get there. But every little step you can do makes a huge difference, right? So I'll certainly counsel patients that I think that they could be, that they could be doing better. But I'm very accepting of anything that anyone's able to do. So this was a patient who has not been able to become completely plant-based, but boy, did he make some really, really significant changes in his lifestyle, and I was super proud of him for that. But I wanted to highlight something that we don't usually talk about, and that is his lab values, right? So we talk about how, all these things, different things can get better with a plant-based diet. Risk of heart disease goes down, risk of diabetes goes down, the list goes on and on and on. And we have so many speakers that touch on all these things, and I think that that's great, but I'm not going to just leave it at that. I wanted to actually show you some improvements in numbers, but actually a little bit more than that. I also wanted to highlight that there are some blood tests that if you have any health issues, certainly if you have any concerns about your heart health, cardiovascular health, diabetes risk, any of these kinds of things, there's some blood tests that aren't usually obtained by a lot of doctors out there, but really should be. And my goal with this is to have you guys advocate for yourselves so that you can be proactive, and you can actually, if the doctor's not offering to do these kinds of things, you can say, hey doc, what do you think about this test? Can you get it? Because I heard about it on in this group, or I've been hearing about it in a podcast or articles or whatever. And again, everything we do in PB Now is evidence-based, so this is not some kind of crackpot stuff that we're talking about. But with that being said, let me share my screen. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you for that affirmation, Terry. And then let's do this. All right, can everybody see that? That's just a list of blood tests. Can everybody see that? Good. Okay, wonderful. So obviously this is a little bit ago, but this was numbers in July, and obviously there's no patient identifiers here, so we're being respectful and legal. But these were labs in July when the patient first met me, and these were labs in October when I saw him. Well, I didn't see him exactly on that day, but when I saw him back, it was early November, and I didn't get a chance to talk to you guys last month, so I'm doing it now. And at his first visit, he ate what we call the standard American or SAD diet, right? Which was just a fair amount of, and it was also the Wisconsin version of it, which is extra dairy in there, as well as red meat and processed meat and all these kinds of things. What I want to highlight is that this guy's LDL, which is the bad cholesterol, was 74. Here, can you see me circling on that? Are you able to see my cursor? You are. Okay, wonderful. So you can see his LDL was 74, and I'm not sure if anybody out there is familiar with what lab values should be or what they are, things like that. But in general, for most people, we really would love to see your LDL, your bad cholesterol. One easy way to remember it is L for lousy. We would want to see your LDL less than 100. And if you have heart disease already, or if you have diabetes, or if you had a stroke, or any of these kinds of things, we definitely want that less than 70. Now, his value was 74. And so a lot of doctors would be out there saying, hey, Mr. Smith, your LDL is pretty close to where we want it to be. We don't have to do much here. But I want to highlight that his triglycerides, which are fat particles floating through the bloodstream, were 384. And you can see here the reference range is 0 to 150. We want these under 150. So he was more than double what he should be, and that's because of his diet and lack of exercise. Now, this guy was referred to me not because of these lab values, but he was referred to me actually because he had a calcium score test that showed that he had some hardening of the arteries. And when I see these lab values, I say, of course, I know exactly why you have hardening of the arteries, because these labs stink. They're not very good. And so during that first visit, we talked to him about improving his diet. We talked to him about all different options for lowering his numbers. We actually put him on some medication because he had some heart disease, and it was a fair amount, and we want to start working on that. But he did make some substantial changes in his lifestyle. And we see that because his triglycerides dropped all the way down to 204. Now, I want to highlight that is still not normal, but he had almost a 50% drop in his triglycerides, and that is not from the medication. Statins won't do that. That is from his efforts at increasing exercise and eating a better diet. And boy, was I super proud of him for this. But what I want to highlight is that his LDL, his bad cholesterol, did not budge much, right? It went from 74 to 79. You can see that. And so most doctors out there, most patients out there would be, I think, really disappointed. Like, gee, I went on this medication, doc. You made me go on it. I've heard maybe horrible things about medications in general, and I definitely don't love the idea of being on medications, and and big pharma is getting their hooks into me and all this stuff. But beyond all my doubts about medication, my number didn't even get better. Like, isn't that terrible? Isn't that bad? And this, I think, the reason I'm showing you this highlights exactly what happens when we rely on the typical cholesterol measurements that have been done for literally decades. And if you rely on just the classic traditional fasting lipid panel that doctors for 40, 50 years have been getting, on their patients, we are going to miss the picture, because again, we are not going to see the tremendous benefit that this gentleman achieved, because what we're going to show you here is that this other blood test called the apolipoprotein B that I'm circling here, and maybe write it down, and as they say in the old TV commercials, ask for it by name. This is a blood test that is a more accurate way of measuring bad cholesterol. And sure enough, what do we see here? 91, which was in red, in the dangerous range, dropped all the way down to 78. Now, again, this is not an ideal number. We would ideally want this into the 60s. But this I can then tell the patient, because if we didn't have that number, right, if we didn't have those, and I was just talking to him about this, I think there's a good chance that he could go away being really disappointed that he changed his diet dramatically. He started exercising, he went on a medication, and it made no difference, right? And you get discouraged. You start giving up on these changes. What's the point of giving up my steaks that I enjoyed? What's the point of giving up my brats? I'm just going to go back to that stuff because it didn't make a difference, but rather it made a huge difference. This being close to the 50th percentile, being average in the country, which is not a good thing because the average rate of dying in this country is from heart disease. And this going down to probably about the 20 or 25th percentile. So this guy shaved, and actually, wait, I have that written down. Oh yeah, so it was 40th and the 20th, sorry. He dropped his percentile rank from the 40th percentile down to the 20th. And we would not have known that had we not gotten this blood test, because you would have been relying just on the traditional things. So this is my patient anecdote for the day. I just wanted to highlight that there's a lot of different tests that we can do, advanced blood tests that we can do, that are all evidence-based, that we can really highlight when someone makes some changes in their diet, makes some changes in their lifestyle. We can show that there's been significant benefit. All right, so with that, I'm going to go back to stopping the screen share. so that you're not distracted by that. So that's the patient anecdote I want to share with you. Now I wanted to talk to you about some research that came out that piqued my curiosity. Give me 1 second. I just want to be able to pull up the reference, and I'll put this reference in the comments. But there was a study that came out just about maybe 2 weeks ago that was really interesting to me about looking at something that we don't really talk about. Again, we focus mostly in these conversations on research that comes out talking about the benefits of plant-based eating in terms of different risk factors, in terms of different outcomes, and I think it might be nice to take a break from that, because most everybody on this call, I think at this point, knows that there's benefit. I mean, that's why you're here, and that's what we talk about every time. But what we don't always talk about is supplements. And in general, I'm a big believer that most of what we need in terms of supplements, minerals, vitamins, all that stuff, we can get in our diets. But there are a couple things that aren't really found in abundance in diets, especially plant-based diets. And one of those supplements that I want to talk about is vitamin K2. So maybe there's a handful of people on this call that have heard of vitamin K2. Maybe we can even do an interactive thing. So maybe put your thumbs up, or by show of hands if you're on the video, if you've heard of vitamin K2 and its potential role in health. All right, Michelle has. That's great. So we have a good amount of thumbs up there, so that's great. We have 45 people on the call, and we have a good amount of thumbs up. So not everybody knows about it. So there's different vitamins, and they all have different biological functions. But vitamin K2, so there's two different kinds of vitamin K. There's K1 and K2. But vitamin K2 for a while now has been purported to have maybe some benefit in preventing hardening of the arteries and keeping blood vessels elastic. And that's because vitamin K2 activates an enzyme called, and again, we're not going to quiz you on this. You don't have to write this down. You don't have to memorize this. But it activates an enzyme called matrix G1A protein. And this ends up keeping this protein, this enzyme, helps to keep arteries flexible. So it makes sense that if there's a vitamin that helps activate it, then that should be beneficial. But the data has not always been 100% convincing. But there was a recent study that showed that it may actually be beneficial, especially in patients who already have hardening of the arteries. So this study came out. It was in the Journal of the American Cardiology. Sorry, I'm talking too fast. Journal of the American College of Cardiology Advances, which is kind of, on the cutting edge of stuff, I suppose, is one way to look at it. And it was a randomized study. So they took about 300 patients, and they divided them into two groups. They put half of them, 150, on vitamin K2 and vitamin D. Most preparations of vitamin K2 also include vitamin D, because there was some thought that they both are needed together. Maybe not the case, but in any case, they put half the group on vitamin K2 and half the group they gave a placebo, and they followed them for 2 years. And they looked at their calcium scores. Now, in order to get into this trial, you had to have a positive calcium score. You had to have some hardening of the arteries. And overall, the study was actually negative. It didn't show that there was a significant difference between the group. Progression of hardening of the arteries was indeed slowed in the vitamin K2 group, but it didn't reach statistical significance. But when they looked at the group of people that had really high calcium scores, that had a lot of hardening of the arteries, scores over 400, it didn't matter your age, then the patients on vitamin K2 actually did benefit. And vitamin K2 helped slow the progression of their hardening of the arteries, which was very significant and very, very notable. The other thing, because of the small numbers in the trial, and it gets into how statistics works, but there was a large decrease in the number of patients who had events. So in the vitamin K2 arm, almost 2% of patients had events like heart attacks or needed stents or deaths or things like that, whereas 6.7% in the placebo group had that, right? So that sounds like it's a huge number, but it didn't meet statistical significance because of the small number of people in the trial. You need a certain number in order to prove that that's not just by random chance. So this study is really what we call hypothesis provoking or hypothesis generating, because it doesn't clearly show that everyone would benefit. It does suggest that there are subgroups that benefit, but boy, it really raised some eyebrows, and as a result of this, or partially as a result of this, there's two large trials that are going to be starting both of them based in Northern Europe and Scandinavia, that are hoping to look and with large enough numbers to see if there's really a benefit. So we're going to have to wait to see the final answer from those trials. It's going to be a couple of years, but certainly there doesn't appear to be any downside to supplementing with vitamin K2, and there may be some potential outside. So, of course, finishing up, the natural question is, well, where can we get vitamin K2? Like, are there foods that have it? And yes, it's mostly found in fermented foods, but in Western diets, it's pretty low in abundance. The most abundant source is a fermented Japanese food called natto, Natto. But that's kind of an acquired taste. Not everybody loves that. There might be some in kimchi or in sauerkraut or other fermented foods. So it's worth those are healthy anyway for their probiotic effects. So you might want to think about increasing your intake of those. But regardless, you can always get it as a supplement. Capsule form, I guess I mean. So that's my talk for tonight. Two different, patient experience from my office and a review of the literature. So thank you all for being on the call, and thank you, Terry, for hosting, and thank you, Michelle, for agreeing to be on and talk to us.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much, Dr. Liberman. That was quite a dramatic change on those lab numbers, and I've got to think, as you mentioned, most people wouldn't realize it without those two additional lab tests.
Yes, the data over the last easily 10 to 15 years is really showing the benefit of these more advanced tests. And the sad thing is they're totally I mean, that apolipoprotein B test, certainly we have a contract in our office, costs $25 to do. And insurance, and it's covered by insurance. I mean, so it's not like it's $1,000 test or you need specialized labs. We have a contract with LabCorp, very, very popular, nationwide company. It takes no time, takes 2 days to come back. So it's an easy thing. These aren't expensive things, but it is crucial to go that extra few steps, to go that extra mile, dig a little deeper, and look at some of these more advanced, quote unquote, advanced tests to really see somebody's level of risk.
Yeah, and you would think that it'd be that this would be more standardized and more people would be taking it, being that cardiovascular disease is the #1 killer of men and women, right?
Yeah, it's just as we know, in trying to advance plant-based diets, it just takes forever to move Western medicine. It just to move guidelines, to move the hundreds of thousands of doctors that were trained in med school without ever knowing about these things. It's hard to move the needle on this stuff, but the key is steady pressure. Patients advocating for themselves. That's the way to do it.
They're all.
I think I have a mute here too.
There's a laundry basket of pants.
There we go. Good to know that there's a laundry basket of pants. Thanks. Thanks, Dr. Liberman. Now we're going to move on to how we go about getting those kinds of results, and talk to somebody who can help us along in that regard. So our featured speaker tonight is a certified plant-based health coach and a physical therapist. She'll be sharing with us the what's, whys, and hows of eating plant-based. And she'll also be dishing out, I think, some of her tried and true tips and tricks for making this healthy way of eating doable, delicious, and fun. I've asked her to spend a little bit of time during the presentation or at the end of it talking about what she does as a plant-based health coach, as she is local easy to access, and provides an excellent way to either learn how to go plant-based or to improve on what you're already doing. So you have a much better chance of not only being successful, but enjoying the trip along the way. I should mention too that she recently taught me how to make plant-based lasagna, and it was excellent. Excellent taste, excellent texture, filling. I went back for more than I probably should have, but it's now going to be a regular part of our dinner choice rotation. I'm happy to introduce to you tonight our featured speaker, Michele Stamn. Michele?
Thank you so much, Terry. Thanks for having me here tonight. I'm super excited to talk with you and your audience, and I'm so glad you like the lasagna. I'm actually making that for my family for Christmas, so I'm glad it passed your test. So I am going to go ahead and share my screen here, and we are going to get started. I'm going to start with a question that I'm guessing you guys are going to think is kind of a strange question to start with, especially when you consider that winter, the first official day of winter is just a few days away. But I ask that you please humor me and let me ask you, how do you like to get into a swimming pool? Like I said, a weird question for the 14th of December, right? But what I want to know is, are you somebody who likes to cannonball into the swimming pool, make a big splash, that kind of person? Or maybe you're somebody who likes to tiptoe into the shallow end. Or maybe you're like me. I'm kind of a middle ground of both of those. I like to jump in about halfway at first up to my waist, and then bit by bit by bit, I get a little more wet. And then finally, and only on a really hot day, I dunk my whole head under the water. But you know what? No matter how you approach the swimming pool, we all have one thing in common, and that is that we all get wet. And it's the same thing with a plant-based diet. You can approach a plant-based diet like I did. I figured out that I pretty much approached a plant-based diet like I like to get into a swimming pool. I jumped in about halfway at first. I gave up meat pretty much overnight. Next to go for me was eggs. And then I gave up dairy bit by bit. I started with the things I didn't really like, like cottage cheese. And then second to last to go for me was ice cream. And I'm sure most of you can guess what the last thing to go for me: cheese. That was the metaphorical ducking my head under the water for me. I finally figured out how to give up cheese, but I have been fully plant-based for over a decade now, and I love it. I love my food. I love how I feel. I really couldn't be happier. And believe me, I used to love the cheese. I don't even miss it anymore. Okay, you can approach plant-based eating the other ways I suggested about getting into a pool as well. You can tiptoe in one step at a time, maybe starting with Meatless Mondays or just checking out a vegan restaurant in town, that kind of thing. And we can't forget our cannonballers, right? Some people really do cannonball in and go fully plant-based overnight. Now, I find a lot of these people tend to be ones who have big health problems. Maybe they literally had a heart attack last week and they think that was a wake-up call. I have got to get my act together. I'm going all in. I also find that people who see the doctor and the doctor says you have 3 months to clean up XYZ, or you're going to go on XYZ medications, and they get real serious about it real fast because, 3 months can pass pretty quickly, right? In fact, I want to tell you about a client of mine who did this. She heard from the doctor if she didn't clean up a few things, she was going to be going on a lot of medications, and she didn't want that to happen. So let me show you what happened to her just 4 months into eating a plant-based diet. In just those 4 months, this woman, she's 70 years old, just to give you a point of reference. She lost 25 pounds. Her blood pressure went from 170 over 94 to 118 over 78, which is high blood pressure to pretty darn good blood pressure. Her cholesterol went down 40 points from 261 to 221. Her constipation, which she had been dealing with probably almost her whole life, was gone pretty much overnight. Her acid reflux also gone pretty much overnight. And she was on meds for this. She took them 5 to 6 nights a week. So it wasn't just a little bit of acid reflux. And I find this one to be almost the most impressive. Her A1C changed from pre-diabetic to normal. Now, why I think that's so remarkable is most people go from pre-diabetes to diabetes, right? Not her. She went the other way. So just 4 months of a plant-based diet and all of this magic happened in her body. So, and it's not just her. Dr. Liberman talked about his patient, and all kinds of people are having this effect from a plant-based diet. And we're going to keep talking about that as we go on. But first, I want to back up a little bit and answer the question, what even is a plant-based diet? I know there's a lot of you here who are probably experts in this, but I also know there are some of you who aren't. So I'm just going to make sure I answer that question. A plant-based diet is just a diet centered around plants. It includes vegetables, fruits, grains, beans, legumes, nuts and seeds, herbs, and spices. It includes all the stuff you see on this screen. It includes appetizers, sandwiches, salads, casseroles, pastas, soups, desserts, breakfast, smoothies, oatmeal, granola, like anything that you would want to eat. Now, notice what I haven't said yet, the foods that you can't eat if choosing to eat a plant-based diet. And this is super intentional because I find it so much more helpful to focus on the foods that you can eat on a plant-based diet rather than to focus on the ones you can't, right? But I think my talk would be incomplete if we didn't talk about the foods that you can't eat if choosing to eat a plant-based diet. So if you're eating a plant-based diet, you don't eat any meat, eggs, or dairy. Now, I get asked a lot of clarifying questions about this, so I'm going to answer those for you too, any questions you might be having in your head. No meat means no meat. It means no beef, no pork, no chicken, no seafood, no fish, no meat. It means no eggs, which I think that one's pretty self-explanatory. And then no dairy means no milk from a cow, not from a sheep, not from a goat, and no foods that are made with that animal dairy. So no cheese or ice cream made with cow's milk, sheep. I don't think they make sheep's milk ice cream, but whatever, none of that stuff. But you can have cheese and products like that are made with plant milk. And of course, plant milk itself is okay. So soy milk, almond milk, that kind of thing. Now I get it. This is when a lot of people look at me and they're like, this is a lot of limitations, but honestly, you guys, I find plant-based eating to instead be such a diverse way of eating. And I think this is because you build your meals differently. We're just such a meat-centric society. If you think about, just a couple of weeks ago, we all had Thanksgiving dinner pretty much, and the star of the show is the turkey, right? Everything is built around the turkey and all the other foods are in the supporting role. So when you're used to thinking about food like that, it's kind of hard to make the shift. And honestly, I really struggled with this myself when I made the shift to eating plant-based. Like I said, between 10 and 15 years ago, that gradual change that I made. But when I sat down to make my first fully plant-based grocery list, I was like, what do I write? Because normally I would think, oh, on Mondays we have meatloaf and then I need this and this. Oh, wait, we don't eat meatloaf anymore. So it took me a while to get used to writing my grocery list a different way. But honestly, now the only hard thing about writing my grocery list is like, look at all those beautiful foods on the slide. The hardest part is trying to figure out what I want to eat because there's so many choices. Okay, so before we continue, I want to define a few terms for you because different people have questions about this for me as well. And just want to say, everybody gets to kind of pick what terms they want to use, right? But vegan tends to be the one that is most people kind of understand the best. So like if I'm in a restaurant trying to explain it to a waiter, that I just use that term vegan. And what vegan means is you don't eat any animals at all, any of the animal products we talked about, but also people who call themselves vegan tend to also they don't want to harm animals in any way. So they won't wear leather, for example. Vegan foods do include things like Oreos and Diet Coke. No animals are harmed when you make Oreos or Diet Coke, but I'm pretty sure no matter where you stand on food, I think we can all agree that Oreos and Diet Coke are not really health food, right? So the second term you see on your slide is whole food plant-based, and it's abbreviated as you see on the slide as well. You'll see that a lot. And I almost don't need to define this one because it defines itself. Somebody who eats a whole food plant-based diet eats whole foods that come from plants, no processed foods whatsoever. So for example, somebody who's whole food plant-based would eat corn, but not corn chips because those are processed. And then the last term you see on your slide is plant-based. This is probably the most loosey-goosey of them all. And I kind of choose that word to define myself, to call myself a plant-based health coach, because I think it's the most inclusive of the most people. And honestly, it defines how I eat. I eat almost all whole food plant-based because I know it is the healthiest way to go, but I won't lie. Sometimes, you know, when they bring out that bowl of tortilla chips at a Mexican restaurant, I might eat a few of those, or maybe even more than a few. So that is just my story. But okay, so when somebody finds out that I'm plant-based, I'm sure you can imagine what the first question I am asked, and I'm sure everybody here who eats plant-based gets asked that question as well. The big question always is, right? Where do you get your protein? Now, I have a lot of education and I could give them a big, complicated answer to that question, but instead I just ask them, and I share this because maybe you want to answer the question too this way as well. Instead of answering it complicated, I just say, well, where do these guys get their protein, right? These are all plant eaters, and everybody on your screen, the elephant, horse, and gorilla, I'm pretty sure they're all faster than I am, and I know they're all stronger than I am. And I figure if they're getting enough protein from plants, I'm going to be just fine. I get my protein from the same place they do, from plants. And not just Popeye's famous spinach, but all plants, even, you know, apples, broccoli, potatoes, all plants have protein. Even that vegetable that we all sort of think is just a waste of time, you know, iceberg lettuce, even iceberg lettuce, you guys, even that has protein. Okay, now if you're still having trouble believing that you can get enough protein on a plant-based diet, I have a question for you to consider. What is the medical term for the condition that results from somebody not getting enough protein? Now, I know we've got a pretty smart audience here tonight, so I'm guessing a few of you know this term, but I'm guessing there's others of you who don't. And that medical term for not getting enough protein is kwashiorkor. Now, I'm guessing most of you don't know people walking around with kwashiorkor because we really don't. In America, pretty much nobody is suffering with this disease. And really that's because the only people who generally have kwashiorkor are the people who don't get enough food, whether it's from poverty or an eating disorder, or maybe they're in the end stages of cancer or something. Those people might have kwashiorkor, but if you went for a walk in your neighborhood today, I'm pretty sure you didn't bump into anybody with this disease. Okay. But there is something that a lot of people, almost everybody you know, is suffering from. And well, it's because they're not getting enough fiber. And that is a real problem that we need to be concerned about in our society, because literally 95% of Americans are not getting enough fiber. That's pretty much almost everybody. And I think you all know the medical term for the person who doesn't get enough fiber. Constipation, yes. A word you probably don't want to hear me talk about a whole lot today, but it is a real problem in our society. And as somebody who used to work in nursing homes, believe me, I know, I heard a lot about it. So I think the fact that almost none of us know the term kwashiorkor and that pretty much all of us know the term constipation points to the fact that we do not have a protein problem in our society. We have a fiber problem. So I don't know. Enough said. If we want to fix that fiber problem, we need to eat more plants, because zero animal foods can, or yes, I'm messing up my order here. Plants are full of fiber, while animal foods contain absolutely zero fiber. And there's my big zero slide. And so animal foods contain absolutely zero fiber. So obviously, if you increase the plants in your diet, you're just automatically going to be increasing the fiber in your diet and hopefully helping to clear up that problem of the 95% of Americans not getting enough. Okay, now before we proceed, I want everybody to take a deep breath. I am not going to ask you any more hard questions, no more medical terms tonight. In fact, I am that really nice teacher who gives you the answer key before the test. Every other question I ask you tonight, the answer is going to be what you see right now on your screen. The answer is going to be 0. Okay, so deep breath. Okay, now another nutrient of concern when people are considering a plant-based diet is calcium. And again, we are going to go back to the animals for the answer to this. Where do you think this pretty lady gets her calcium from? She wasn't just born as a calcium factory. She gets her calcium from plants and probably from some of the dirt that sticks to the plants she eats because she doesn't wash her vegetables before she eats them. Okay, people think you have to drink milk or have dairy to get your calcium, but it's not true. You can just go directly to the source. Cut out the middleman. Don't eat the cow, just eat the plants. I've seen a meme on Facebook that says, if you want to know if you should drink cow's milk, just ask your mom. If your mom answers moo, then yes, you need to drink cow's milk. If she answers with anything else, you are totally fine. You don't need this stuff. Now, I am living proof that you do not need to drink milk to build healthy bones. Here's where I fess up and tell you that I am not an athlete. I'm not a super coordinated person. A couple of years ago, I went cross-country skiing, and in my defense, it was for the first time, but I fell going down a hill. And again, I wish I could tell you it was a big hill, but it was probably the smallest hill you've ever seen. But long story short, my skis went to the left at the bottom of this baby hill, and my body went to the right, and I landed right here on my shoulder. Like I said, I'm not very coordinated. The doctor told me when he looked at my x-rays, I broke my upper humerus in 3 places. Apparently you can break it in 4 places. So I almost got it perfect, but only 3 out of the 4. He said it looked like if you can picture your humerus, that's your arm bone, which is like ends in that ball and socket joint up at the top of your shoulder. He said it looked like if you took an ice cream cone and went like this on top of the ice cream cone and then the cone cracked around it. That's what I did. Do not recommend. It is terrible. It hurt so much. I would never recommend it. But I was like, okay, this happened to me. So I am going to use this as a chance to prove that my plant-based diet can do all the things that I think it can. So I spent the next 8 weeks, not drinking any milk, but instead eating really great plant sources of calcium. I took my vitamin D and I did all my PT things, wore my sling, used my ice, all the stuff I was supposed to do. And 8 weeks later, I'm going to show you my x-rays. Okay, there they are. So the x-ray on the left shows, you see that oval that T there you see in there is 2 of the 3 fractures. Okay, so it's pretty obvious. You can see those fractures. 8 weeks later, the slide on the right that says March 24th, you can't see any fractures. That bone 100% healed. And I know you don't see them because my orthopedic doctor could not see any fractures in that bone as either. He said that if he hadn't known I broke my bone from the first x-ray, he wouldn't have even known I ever broke it. So no milk went into the healing of that bone. Okay, so there's my proof on calcium. Now, another nutrient of concern for people when they think about a plant-based diet is iron. And I have another story for you about that. So I am a regular blood donor. And as you probably know, to be able to safely donate blood, you would need to have healthy stores of iron. So if any of you have ever given blood, first of all, thank you. That is a beautiful gift to give. So thank you for doing that. But if you've given blood, you know that the first thing they do when you walk in is they prick your finger. And if you have healthy stores of iron, they let you proceed and give blood. And if you don't, they just give you a cookie and send you on your way. So guess how many times that I have been turned away from giving blood because my iron was too low? I think you know the answer. 0. I have never once been turned away from giving blood because my iron is too low. Not once. And I haven't eaten, red meat for sure for over 15 years, probably longer. I don't, I told you, I eat a plant-based diet. It's been a darn long time since I've had red meat or any other meat, and I've never been turned away. And I don't take iron supplements either. I just eat a lot of iron-rich plant-based foods. I am a little more intentional about it the week before I give blood, and I treat myself to that beautiful chocolate smoothie you see there that's filled with iron-rich foods, and then I focus on eating other rich sources of plant-based iron as well. So okay, so you really, really can get almost everything you need on a plant-based diet, except a couple things, which we're going to talk about now, but these are easily remedied with supplements. So this is where I always pause and say, I am not a doctor, so I can't tell you what supplements to take. Dr. Liberman made a great suggestion earlier about K2, and he'd be able to help you out if you want somebody to tell you for sure. But as a coach, all I tell you is supplements to consider. But I will tell you, B12 is one to really, 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 really consider if you are on a plant-based diet. And that's because unless your food is fortified, you're not going to get B12 from your food if you're eating only plants. Now, you guys probably hear about this a lot, so I'm not going to talk about it a long time, but I will tell you, I did encounter a patient once who had very low vitamin B12. Now, this was when I worked in a nursing home and in the rehab floor, and this guy was not a vegan, I'm sure of it. He just was an older gentleman who took very poor care of himself. But when he came in, his vitamin B12 was very low, and he almost appeared as if he had had a stroke. His speech was really hard to understand. He was very confused. He couldn't walk without help. He was kind of a mess. They got his B12 up to a normal level, and it was like a miracle. This guy was fine. He talked fine. His memory was great. He could walk without a walker. He was fine. So I just share that because I have firsthand seen what a big deal vitamin B12 is. So I just would not mess around with this. Okay. All right. The second supplement I want you to consider is vitamin D. And again, this has nothing to do with being plant-based and everything to do with, at least I think most people here live in Wisconsin. And I think we're seeing about 5 minutes of sunlight these days. So, the sun is where you get your vitamin D. And if you don't see a lot of sun, you probably need to think about supplementing, but I'll let you consult with your doctor about all the details of that. Okay, and of course, the very best way to ensure all that you need to get from your plant-based diet is to eat a diverse diet. That way you're going to get all different kinds of nutrients that are in all the different foods that you can eat. Now, I'm sure some of you have heard the term microbiome. That is just the fancy word for the microbes and the bacteria, the fungi, all the stuff living in your gut. And a lot of it's good, guys, right? And the good gut bugs, there's lots of them. Without getting in the specifics, it's like a cajillion or something like that. There's a lot of microbes in your gut. And guess what? They need to eat too. And what they like to eat, mostly the thing they like to eat is fiber. So if you think about that, we just talked about how fiber only comes from plants, not animals. You need to be eating plants to properly feed your gut microbiome, okay? And different kinds of microbes like to eat different kinds of fiber from different kinds of plants. So the more diverse number of plants that you eat, the more diverse microbiome you can support. And really, that's how you support the best health in your body. In a really, simple way of explaining it. Dr. Will Bulsiewicz is one of, the plant-based doctors that I really like to follow. And he says the diversity of plants in your diet is the #1 predictor of a healthy gut microbiota. So it's a big deal to eat as many different plants as you can, but really, you guys, it does not need to be complicated. Eat a variety of plants and you will be fine. Okay, so who can safely eat a plant-based diet? I get asked this question a lot. I get asked about specific groups of people. I get asked about pregnant or breastfeeding women, babies, kids, teenagers, seniors. And without getting into all the specifics, I'll just tell you, can they eat a plant-based diet safely? Yes, 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 and yes. Now, another group of people that I often get asked about is athletes. Can they get all they need on a plant-based diet? And again, the answer is yes. Now, I get it. This sounds crazy to some people if they've never thought it before, but seriously, athletes can get everything they need, including all the protein and all the everything else from plants. They made a movie about it, and probably some of you have heard of this movie, I'm sure, but the movie is called The Game Changers. This is a fantastic plant-based movie. If you've not seen it, I highly recommend it. It's not a movie about how, high school athletes got a little better at their sport by eating more plants. It's a movie about Olympic level athletes who shaved that 10th or 100th of a second off their time so they could win the gold medal. It's those kind of athletes. It's professional NFL players and people like that are in this movie. People you've heard of like Venus Williams, the tennis star. She's in the movie. She's a vegan. Maybe people you haven't heard of, like a gentleman named Patrick Baboumian. He is literally the strongest man in the world. He holds the world's record for being the strongest man in the world. And there's a great scene in the movie where he's pulling this cart like he's an ox kind of, and he's just walking pulling this cart, and the cameraman jumps on the cart, and then the director jumps on the cart, and he can just keep pulling them because he's literally the strongest man in the world, and he is a vegan. Okay, so hopefully I have eliminated by now some of your biggest concerns about eating a plant-based diet, and hopefully I have piqued your interest in giving plant-based eating a try. But I know enough about this to know that some of you still might be having a few concerns about this running through your head. And for tonight's purposes, we are going to call those hurdles. Now, I don't know about you, but I remember looking at those hurdles in middle school and I was terrified of them. I already established from my skiing story that I am not an athlete. Okay. So that I am not now. I was not then. So when my middle school gym teacher pulled out those hurdles, I was like, are you kidding me? You want me to go over those? I was terrified. And I use this analogy because I think this is how some people feel when they think about going on a plant-based diet. They're like, yep, this sounds good, but oh, I could never get over those hurdles. So, but the truth is, even I figured out how to get over those hurdles in middle school, and people can figure out how to get over the hurdles we're going to talk about tonight too. And I am going to help you get started over those hurdles. So we're going to talk through 6 tonight. The first hurdle we're going to talk about is belief. Now, this is really the most important one to get down right from the start. People, I find, have trouble believing in themselves. They think, I can't do this. I can't go on a plant-based diet, or, this isn't going to work for me. I know Dr. Liberman, I know Michelle, they say this works, but it is not going to work for me. And I get that, but that is a terrible place to start. So I ask these people who don't believe in themselves or a plant-based diet to suspend their disbelief. Now, I know that sounds like a complicated term, but it really isn't, because at one point or another, everybody in this room has suspended their disbelief. And the reason I put the little Charlotte's Web book on the slide is because when you read Charlotte's Web or another book where the animals talked when you were a kid, you had to suspend your disbelief or you would never have enjoyed the book. If you read Charlotte's Web the whole time thinking, spiders can't talk, pigs can't talk, this is dumb, you would have hated the book, right? So you suspended your disbelief about animals talking and you enjoyed the book. And that is what I ask people to do when they feel like they just can't believe in themselves. Even if you can't get to belief, suspend your disbelief, put it on the shelf, and just do something to get started. And then as you start making progress, it gets easier to believe in yourself. You really just need to take that first step. Your body starts feeling better, you start liking the food, and things get going. Now, the second hurdle I want to talk about is overwhelm. A lot of people feel like this poor girl on the slide when they think about going on a plant-based diet. They just there's so much to think about. What do I eat? Where do I shop? Blah. And people feel overwhelmed with it, which is again a really terrible place to start. So if this is how you're feeling, just take one step at a time. You just have to get started. And I get it, starting anything new can be overwhelming, but trust me, it does not have to be hard. You've all learned how to do things in your life that you didn't know when you started, right? And think about what you did in those situations. You checked resources, you found books or movies or, things like that you could check out of a library. There's tons of plant-based resources. We're going to talk about those more in a little bit. That's a great place to start getting past your overwhelm. Also a great idea to find somebody who knows what they're doing, right? Just like you had somebody help you learn how to quilt or change the oil in a car. Find somebody who knows what they're doing. I might suggest, if you don't have anybody in your inner circle who knows how to eat a plant-based diet, reach out to somebody who wants to help you. Somebody like a plant-based health coach like me. I love helping people get started on a plant-based diet. Another suggestion is to see if you can find some people to come alongside you as you make the change. If you have a friend or a family member doing this with you, it's just going to be so much easier, right? And if you have other people in your life on your side, it is actually going to help with the next hurdle we are going to talk about, the other people slide or other people hurdle. Now, happily, I work with some really nice people, and I find many of my clients are afraid of offending the other people in their lives by eating differently than them, or by turning down that Thanksgiving turkey we talked about a little bit before. Or maybe they're worried about being the weird person at the table when the waiter comes that asks for that special no cheese on their salad, please, or something. And believe me, I get it, because I had all those same concerns myself. When I started eating this way, I was worried about all those things. But do you know what I learned? For the most part, people didn't really care what I was eating. They weren't paying that much attention to me. I think we're all so worried that everybody's looking at us, but the real truth is they're trying to figure out what they're going to order at the restaurant. They really don't care. And the truth is, you get to choose what you put in your body. We don't have agency over everything in our life, but for goodness sake, what we put into our mouths, we do have agency over that. Now, let's talk about those other people that we live with, right? Our partners, our spouses, our kids. When you have somebody in your house who does not want to go on this plant-based journey with you, believe me, I understand that really can be hard. But there are some simple ways to make it work. And, just a real quick suggestion is you could make like a veggie stir fry and serve the chicken on the side. So there's some workarounds like that. But what I have found the best thing is to make beautiful and delicious plant-based food. And that kind of is an invitation to people to want to eat plant-based as well. A real quick story about that. Christmas is coming up, and ever since I've been a Stamn, I married my husband almost 30 years ago now. The Stamn family Christmas has always been centered around my mother-in-law's meatballs. That was always the star of the show, which was fine for the first 15 years I was a part of the family, but then I decided I wasn't going to eat meat anymore. So I didn't want to draw a lot of attention to myself. So I chose to just skip the meatballs and instead put the, green beans and salad on my plate. So literally for years for Christmas, I ate green beans and salad, which was fine. But it finally dawned on me that I don't think that was a very good invitation for people into eating plant-based food. If the rest of my family was like, ooh, I don't want to just eat green beans and salad for Christmas, right? So at that point, I decided to start making either that vegan lasagna Terry was talking about, or pretty closely related vegan stuffed shells. They're beautiful and they taste amazing. And all of a sudden, the people in my family are a little more interested about eating the vegan food or the plant-based food that I have, because it's more than just green beans and salad. Okay. Now, they're not all 100% plant-based, but there has been movement in my family, I will say. They still have some meatballs on their plate, most of them, but pretty much everybody tries the other pasta that I've made as well. Okay, so another hurdle for people is simply my slides keep skipping once in a while. So another hurdle for people is the food. Sometimes people just look at me and they're like, what do you even eat? They just can't wrap their heads around it. So I tell them, a really good place to start is think about the plant-based foods that you already eat. Unless you have a peanut allergy, I'm pretty sure that everybody on this event tonight has at one time or another eaten a PB&J with an apple on the side. I think all of our moms threw that in a brown paper bag for us at one point or another. That is a vegan plant-based meal, okay? You probably have eaten it before in your life. Pasta with marinara sauce, another super simple plant-based meal that you probably already eat. And then there's some foods that can be made plant-based with just a simple swap. Take your oatmeal and put almond milk instead of dairy milk on it, or take the ground beef out of a recipe and substitute lentils in. You don't even have to change that much, and you can take a pretty common to your, a meal that's in your regular routine and make it plant-based. I really think the best place to start is right where you're at. So if you're a Taco Tuesday family or a Sunday morning pancake family, keep the pancakes, keep the tacos, just find ways to make them plant-based. It's so much easier to make those simple changes and just take one meal at a time. There's tons of food to eat. If you think back to that slide I shared before, there's so much out there and it's all good. Okay, so people start figuring out how to eat at home plant-based maybe, but then the things that start tripping them up are the social situations. So I'm talking about restaurant eating or going to parties or maybe going on vacation or to a wedding or something like that. And what I want to say is sometimes people let those things from keep them from even getting started. So they're like, well, yeah, this sounds pretty good, but I've got that wedding coming up in February, so I'll go plant-based after that. But seriously, you guys, if that is what you're thinking, don't think like that, because there's like 6 weeks between now and that wedding that you could be figuring out how to eat plant-based. And however you eat that one day at the wedding, there's ways to eat plant-based at the wedding, but even if you can't figure it out, don't let that wedding or that vacation or whatever keep you from getting started. Now, we don't have time to get into all of the ins and outs of these different social situations, but trust me, there are ways to navigate all of them. And this right here is what I spend a lot of my coaching time on with my clients, figuring out how they're going to eat at that one resort or that one restaurant or that kinds of things. But I will tell you that things will generally go better if you plan ahead. Pretty much all menus are online now, so you can always look at the menu ahead of time, make a few phone calls if you have a few questions about the menu, or call the resort you're staying. Or the other thing is, you can, if you're going to somebody's house, call them. As long as you plan ahead, things will generally go pretty well. Okay, and the last hurdle I want to talk about is perfectionism. I have found that there are people who are afraid of not getting it all right just from the start, but the truth is you don't have to. Perfection is the enemy of good, especially when it keeps you from even getting started. You cannot make any progress if your perfectionism keeps you from getting started. So just get started. Just do anything, right? I had one client who was a bit of a perfectionist and also struggled with that overwhelmed feeling that we talked about earlier. She just couldn't wrap her head around how to start with everything. So I said, you know what? Just start with breakfast. And this is what happened. She had formerly been eating eggs every single day for breakfast. And then she stopped eating eggs for breakfast and started eating oatmeal with plant milk. Didn't change lunch, didn't change dinner. And do you know what happened just by her making that one simple switch? Her knee pain started going away. She had, because the inflammation in her body went down. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. But this woman is in her 50s and had not been able to kneel in church for 10 years or longer. But 2 weeks of only changing her breakfast, she could kneel in church again, you guys, because her knees started feeling that much better. Crazy. Crazy because I can't believe it's true. These things as a physical therapist about people's pain blows my mind. Another client, I'm going to talk about her knee pain now too, because sometimes clients, they'll get started, or not just clients, but people will get started on a plant-based diet, and then they have the big slip up, right? They blow it or whatever. And my clients will come to me and say, oh, I slipped up. And I always first tell them, I am not the vegan confessional, okay? Like, it's totally fine. We're all human and we do those slip ups. But then I ask them, what did you learn from that slip up? And tell you a quick story to understand what I'm talking about here. I had a client a couple of years ago, and she decided she wanted to go 100% plant-based for Lent. And up until Lent, she had had terrible knee pain. I guess I work with a lot of people with knee pain. She was in her mid 50s, and her knee pain on that 10-point scale was like an 8 or a 9. So really bad knee pain, both of her knees. So bad that she did not normally bend down to her lower cupboard to get that giant big soup pot out of the back. You know the one I'm talking about. She'd call her kids in to help her with that. So a few weeks into Lent, all of a sudden she found herself squatting down on the ground, pulling that pan out. And she all of a sudden realized, she's like, oh my gosh, how did I get down here? My knees didn't hurt at all. Can I get up? And then she was kind of afraid, but she stood up and her knees didn't hurt. And then apparently she stood at her counter doing squats up and down because she couldn't believe how good her knees felt. Her pain was gone. In fact, it was a 0. It went from that 8 or a 9 to a 0 just by changing what she ate for a period of time during Lent. Even still, she told me, you know what, Michele? I am going to still have Polish sausage on Easter. That came at the end of the 40 days of Lent. And she still wanted to have Polish sausage on Easter because that's what her family eats on Easter. So I was like, okay, fine. You do you. And so she did. And she was totally fine on Easter. But you know what happened, right? There were the leftovers. So she had those the next day. And guess what? Her knee pain started coming back. So her slip up Rather than being a perfectionist, her slip up allowed her to really understand what plants versus animals did in her body. And that's way more motivating than anything that I could ever tell her. Okay, so once you get over all these hurdles, what happens at the end of the race? You get to the finish line. I want to tell you what one of my clients said when she reached the finish line after she had been eating fully plant-based for a few months. She said that she felt as if she had been lied to her entire life. This woman is in her mid-40s and she has never once had a period without migraines and terrible pain. And she thought this was just normal. And now that she eats a plant-based diet, she hasn't had a migraine in over a year. She was told that the pain in her big toe was arthritis, and it was just part of getting older. The doctor took an x-ray and said, oh, you're just getting older. You're just going to have to live with this big toe pain for the rest of your life. But within weeks of changing to a plant-based diet, it was gone. The changes that can happen in your body just by changing what you eat are absolutely incredible. I have worked with women who have gone from dreading their periods to barely noticing them. I have worked with women in menopause who have gone from the constant hot flashes, gone. Hot flashes, gone. I have worked with teenagers who have seen their skin clear up to the point where they no longer even feel like they need to wear makeup. Now, if you've ever been a teenage girl, you know that is a big deal. And all of those changes happen because once you get the animal hormones out of your diet, then your body can find its own hormonal balance again. Let's talk a little bit more about inflammation. I've talked about this a lot. So many clients, I've had at least 5 now, have talked to me about the terrible knee pain they've had on the stairs or whatever, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 kind of pain on a 10-point scale. With going on a plant-based diet, they're all telling me that their pain is now 0. I'm a physical therapist, you guys. I'm not the best physical therapist that ever lived, but I'm definitely not the worst. And nothing I ever did as a PT ever helped people's pain as much as I've been able to help people with their pain since becoming a plant-based health coach. I cannot believe how big of an impact this plant-based diet has on people's joint pain. It blows my mind. I have a client who, she came to her first session with me and she cannonballed in. She started eating fully plant-based right away. Our second session was 6 days later. And I even thought I was crazy when I asked her, like, well, have you noticed any changes? But she had. She said, you know, Michele, I used to hold my hands like this all day long because I had terrible arthritis pain in my hands all day long. And 6 days into eating a plant-based diet, her pain was gone. Okay. Animal foods and processed foods are inflammatory. Plant foods, on the other hand, are anti-inflammatory. So it doesn't take a genius to figure it out. Take the inflammatory foods out of your diet, put the anti-inflammatory foods back into your diet, and the fires will calm, the inflammation will come down. Okay, so people are feeling better, but Michele, what about the real problems? Okay, I think we can all agree that a real problem in the United States is heart disease because it is the leading cause of death. And we all know there are some simple ways to check on your heart disease situation in your body, right? We check your blood pressure and your cholesterol. And what happens to those numbers when you go on a plant-based diet? They come down crazy quickly sometimes. Now, I don't have all the nuanced numbers that Dr. Liberman discussed. I have more just the total cholesterol numbers, but I still want you to take a look. At the top part of this slide, the blood pressure numbers, all these numbers at the top part of the slide are about a woman who is 82 years old. She made these changes in her health by a plant-based diet when she was 82 years old. 3 months into eating a plant-based diet, her blood pressure went from 175/90, which is not good, to 127/70, which is pretty darn good for somebody who's 82. Her cholesterol went from 234 to 175 in just 6 weeks. And there's other numbers on your slide there too. And I didn't want to fill up the whole night talking about this, but people are lowering their cholesterol crazy quickly sometimes by eating a plant-based diet. And it makes sense, doesn't it? Because all animal foods other than egg whites and honey contain cholesterol. And well, guess how many plant foods contain cholesterol? I'm pretty sure you're catching on by now. 0, plant foods contain cholesterol. So if you remove the animal foods from your diet and replace them with plant foods, almost surely your cholesterol is going to come down. Now, it doesn't always work exactly like magic, but for most people, it is almost like magic. It's crazy. Okay, now the second leading cause of death in the United States is cancer. And unfortunately, I'm sure everybody in this Zoom room knows somebody who has suffered with cancer at one point in their lives. And I can say that pretty confidently because almost 40% of Americans will someday be diagnosed with cancer during their lifetime. Now, we do not have time tonight to get into all the ins and outs of that conversation, but there are a couple things I want you to really think about, okay? Now, we all know that we should be avoiding class 1 carcinogens, right? We all know, even the people who smoke know they shouldn't be smoking because tobacco is a class 1 carcinogen. Asbestos is another class 1 carcinogen. So when the home remodelers come into our older homes, they have to put on the mask and everything. We're doing all kinds of things to protect ourselves from asbestos because it is a class 1 carcinogen. But how many of you know that processed meat is also a class 1 carcinogen? I'm talking about the pepperoni on your pizza, the bacon you had for breakfast, and the brats on your grill. All of those things are a class 1 carcinogen, the same as tobacco, the same as asbestos. And following closely behind is red meat, which is a class 2A carcinogen. Okay, what you eat makes a big difference when it comes to cancer. A good friend of mine had a colonoscopy a couple years ago during which her doctor found 7 polyps. Now that's not good because probably a lot of you know polyps are precancerous. So at her colonoscopy, they cut out those 7 polyps and that all kind of freaked out my friend a little bit. And she went on what she calls a mostly plant-based diet. Part of the change that she made on going on this mostly plant-based diet is she cut out her daily lunch meat sandwich, okay? And she wasn't getting like the generic bologna. She was getting that fancy stuff you go up to the deli counter and have cut. But she took that out of her diet. And when she went back for her colonoscopy follow-up 2 years later, guess how many polyps she had in her colon? 0. I know, you guys totally are catching on to my answer key thing here, aren't you? Okay, what you put on your fork absolutely matters when it comes to cancer and when it comes to your health. There's one more disease I want to talk about tonight, type 2 diabetes. And yes, we're going to talk about another story. This one is about a man named Eric Adams, who, if you don't know Eric, he is currently the mayor of New York City. Now, he's in great health now, but about 7 years ago, when he was 56 years old, he woke up one day barely able to see. Now, if you ever wake up and you're barely able to see, you know what you do is you get your butt to the doctor really fast, and that's exactly what Eric did. And when he got to the doctor ran all kinds of tests, and he found out that Eric had type 2 diabetes. His A1C was horribly high, and it was the diabetes that was affecting the arteries behind his eyes, and that was causing him to have trouble seeing. So his A1C was horribly high. It was 17%. If you know anything about A1C, that should make you like gasp. Normal A1C is below 5.7, and once you're at 6.5 and higher, you have diabetes. And Eric's was 17. I did not get that wrong. I have double checked that so many times. It was so high. It was so bad. He really was lucky he wasn't in a coma or even worse. So of course, Eric's doctor prescribed insulin for him right away, along with some other meds, and said, well, now you have diabetes and you're just going to be on these meds for the rest of your life. Long story short, this did not sit well with Eric, so he did some of his own research and he put himself on a plant-based diet and he completely reversed his diabetes. If you want the long story, you can read it in his book, Healthy at Last, but I'll just tell you, when he returned to his doctor a couple months after his original diagnosis, his doctor, of course, redid the blood work and he was amazed by how well Eric was doing. And he said, oh my gosh, I have never seen medication work this well in my life. You have totally no marker of diabetes in your blood. It seems to have cleared up, but those meds, they must really be working. And Eric at that point said, oh, doctor, I stopped taking my meds a while ago. And so the point is his plant-based diet fully reversed his diabetes. Now, I would never, ever, ever recommend that somebody just go off their meds without talking to their doctor. But of course, Eric didn't consult with me before making that choice. So I think it's an amazing story, though, that the plant-based diet reversed even that terrible of a condition of diabetes. Now, you should know this is not just a story about Eric Adams. People do this all the time. I've told you about my my client who reversed her pre-diabetes. People do that all the time. People reverse their diabetes all the time with a plant-based diet. In fact, Dr. Kim Williams is the cardiologist who wrote the foreword for this book. And in the foreword, he writes, "You might think that Eric's transformation is miraculous. You might think that his case is unique, and surely you can't achieve the same results. But I see it every single day in my office with patients who are even sicker than he was. So I want you to keep this in mind. You can do this too." And we have now arrived at my why, because I also believe that you can do this too. And if you want to eat plant-based to improve your health, I don't want anything standing in your way. None of those hurdles we talked about, and no other hurdles that might be coming up for you either. I became a plant-based health coach because I know how many sick people there are in this world who could completely turn around their health just by changing what they eat. Like we've mentioned a few times, I'm a physical therapist, and I most of my career was not helping people like you kind of think traditionally with traditional physical therapists would do, like with a sprained ankle or a broken shoulder or something like that. I mostly worked with people with very devastating health situations in rehab settings and nursing home settings, who had maybe lost their leg by amputation to diabetes, or maybe they had a stroke from high cholesterol. Those were the people that I would work with in PT. And they worked really, really hard because most of them were trying to go home, but they needed to do hard things like learn to walk again. So we would be in physical therapy together. They're sweating, I'm sweating, working so hard, getting them to be able to go home again, overcoming these devastating health conditions that have happened to them. And they'd be making great progress. And then I'd take them back to their room where their lunch tray would be waiting for them with, you know what was on it? Meatloaf or the ham and cheese omelet, and always the little carton of milk was there too. And I wanted to pull my hair out because I felt like I am working so hard and they are working so hard to overcome their stroke. And here we are, we're delivering them their second stroke right here on a tray, right in the very place where they're trying to recover. So that is why I decided to become a plant-based health coach, because instead of waiting to work with people after they're seriously ill and in need of rehab, it's my hope to instead connect with those same people beforehand so I can help them never have that stroke, never need that amputation. No one wants those devastating things to happen to them. No one ever wants to be in a nursing home, trust me. And I get it. It can be really overwhelming to make those changes. So that's why my goal as a health coach, a plant-based health coach, is to make eating plant-based simple, doable, delicious, and sometimes even fun for people. Okay, so hopefully by now I've really got you guys thinking about giving a plant-based diet a try if you're not eating that way already. But it also is probably leads you to be asking the question of, what are some resources that I can use to help me with this switch? Now, I am going to flash some things by kind of quickly on these slides. It's not that I'm trying to keep this information from you. It's just we're not going to spend a long time on this. But in the chat is linked all the resources here. And in a little bit, I'm going to share how you can join my mailing list. And if you join my mailing list, I'm going to share all these resources with you as well. But if you want, feel free to, get your cameras out and take a picture. You can do that if that feels better to you. These are just, the Healthy at Last book is on the top of the slide because we already talked about that, but there's so many great books about getting started with a plant-based diet. Okay, next, these are some of my favorite cookbooks, plant-based cookbooks. One little tip on cookbooks is I always like to check them out from the library first because, I don't know, I want to make sure I like the recipes before I spend the money. So these are some of my favorite plant-based movies, the Game Changers we already talked about, and I just think these movies are a great place to learn. They're well done, very entertaining, and really probably one of the best ways to learn a lot of information in a really just a 2-hour period of time. Another great way to learn about eating plant-based is through podcasts. These are some podcasts that I really enjoy. They're all different. And my handout explains a little bit more about each one than I could put on the slide here. Then you have my favorite plant-based resource, my weekly newsletter. Every Wednesday morning, I send out a newsletter to anyone who's on my list. And if you want to join my list, I would love to have you on my list. You can use the QR code there on the slide, or again, there's a link in the chat of how to join my mailing list to receive my Wednesday newsletter. What do you get in the newsletter? Recipes, resources, all kinds of things that are meant to help you on your plant-based journey to better health, whether you're just getting started or whether you've been eating this way for a long time. I share all stories like the ones that I shared with you tonight, basically is what is there. It's just meant to be encouragement to you. I do have my sort of famous chocolate chip cookie recipe that I will send you in a few days if you sign up for my mailing list. Yes, that is a bribe. These are not whole food plant-based, but they're vegan and they are amazing. So if you're interested in getting that recipe, you're going to want to get on my mailing list. And then finally, if you want to make a switch to a plant-based diet and you just haven't been able to do so because of some of those hurdles we talked about, or maybe other things that are coming up for you, please reach out to me. I would love to help you make the change to a plant-based diet. It's so easy to get started. You just shoot me an email. We find a time to talk. All of you know how to use Zoom because you're here tonight. And this is how I meet with my clients. Of course, in the consult call, our first conversation, there's no charge for that. And we're just going to talk on Zoom. I want to hear about the hurdles that are getting in your way. And we're going to start problem solving for those hurdles right away on that very first call. And then all of our meetings will be on Zoom. I do them right from my kitchen. It's great. I can be like, oh, wait, I'm going to show you an ingredient. And I run to my fridge and get it. So it works out really well. And the thing is, since I do all this on Zoom, no matter where you live in the world, I can be your plant-based health coach if that is something you're interested in. So please sign up for my newsletter. Please reach out if you'd like to talk about coaching with me. Okay, so in conclusion, I hope that I have left you with, there is required laughter here. I have left you with some plant-based food for thought. Okay, I can't hear you, but I know you're all laughing. So I hope this is a great starting point for you. And then now I guess we're going to see if you have any questions.
That was outstanding, Michelle.
Thank you, Terry.
So I'll check some of the questions. I know there was a question right off the bat in the beginning, and that was for your lasagna recipe.
Okay. Tell you what, I'll send that to everybody who signs up. I don't know I can't get it in the chat and keep talking, but if you sign up for my mailing list, I will get you my lasagna recipe. Basically, it's really simple. It's pasta and sauce, probably similar to the ones you already use. And then I make a ricotta cheese with tofu. It's amazing. So if I do say so myself.
And I wasn't the only one who ate the lasagna. Somebody else in our household did who is not plant-based and said it was very good.
Okay.
And asked me to cut or asked me to freeze 2 pieces because we've got a birthday party coming up in about a week and a half, and she wanted those who are plant-based to have that available to them. And
Okay.
that was hard for me. It was hard for me to stick them in the freezer because I couldn't stop eating this stuff.
All right. Well, good. It's not that hard to make, so you could make it again, right?
No, and I don't cook, as Michelle could tell, because we were on Zoom together when we did this, and I was fumbling as I did it, but it turned out extremely well.
Good.
So,
I'm so glad.
And I really enjoyed that process of being on Zoom and doing that together, because if I saw the recipe by itself and attempted to do it without seeing the different stages, what things were supposed to look like, and exactly how you went about doing it, I don't think it would have turned out the way that it did.
Oh, that's great to hear. And that, just for all of you listening, that is something that I do as a coach. You know, we certainly talk a lot, but if you want to cook together, I'm in my kitchen, and if you're in yours, we can do that too. So thanks for bringing that up, Terry.
Let's see, I'm just looking at the chat here, and I see Lonnie mentioned, I've read that vitamin D is a marker for further testing. If your vitamin D, I imagine it's low, kind of the canary in the coal mine. And I'd mentioned too, as far as B12, and I'm sure a lot of the people on this call know this, but the reason that vegans or people who are plant-based need to, and probably many people who are not plant-based need to supplement for B12 is because it comes in the bacteria that normally we used to get when on the food that we ate or the water that we drank when things were not washed so well, and now they wash that off, so we don't get it, and that's why we need to supplement. It's not because a plant-based diet is lacking
Right.
something.
Right. And the animals typically don't wash all their food before they eat it, right? So they get that B12 generally. And then people who eat meat get the B12 through that meat. And this is a complicated conversation because there's there's a lot of soil depletion and stuff. So it's really not just the plant-based eaters that are struggling with low B12, but it's definitely something to that you need to be aware of if you're choosing to eat a plant-based diet. And as far as vitamin D, yes, if your vitamin D is really low, definitely be taught, you don't want to probably just put that fire out with your by taking supplements. You should probably talk to your doctor about that as well. So good point.
Lonnie mentioned, and this is probably kind of a PT question, are there exercises to aid in better digestion?
Again, that's probably a complicated question. I think it would have to do more with like the timing of when you're exercising and stuff. And really, I think so much of digestion has to do with having a healthy gut microbiota, which has to do with the fiber that you eat, that kind of thing. But surely exercise is important to support health. I don't know that I know specific exercises to tell you for digestion without knowing more details.
I'd add too, from a personal side, that I was a cannonballer into a plant-based, and it wasn't because I had any health concerns. I just saw some information and it was so convincing, and then looked at other doctors, respected doctors, and they were saying 80–90% were saying the same thing, that I jumped in as a cannonball. And as Michele mentioned, the digestion, within a few days, certainly within a couple of weeks, was different than I had ever had before in my life. And I suddenly realized I had been constipated my entire life. And boy, does that make a difference. It just gives you so much more energy too, because your body's not working so hard to move these things through your system.
Right.
Vicki mentioned love Cookie and Kate cookbooks.
I do too. I love Cookie and Kate very much. And she's a vegetarian. She eats definitely a lot of vegan recipes, and most of her recipes, she says how to make them vegan if they're not originally vegan. But I love the Love Real Food cookbook. And I sometimes hesitate to tell people that because it's not a vegan cookbook, it's a vegetarian cookbook. But she tells you how to adjust the recipes, and I've also figured out how to adjust the recipes, but everything else about her recipes are amazing. And many of them are vegan. So yeah, I'm totally a Cookie and Kate fan myself. I did see somebody ask a question about almost losing too much weight eating a plant-based diet. And yeah, you still have to get the calories you need. I will tell you, I worked with a young woman, a teenager, who actually was struggling with an eating disorder and losing too much weight. And we worked together. So we really did talk about, eating more caloric plant-based foods, nuts and seeds and avocados and beans. And, but I will tell you, in the time we worked together, there was obviously a lot going on with this girl, but she she was very thin when we started working together. And then she ate a completely plant-based diet and she looks amazing now. She is in really great health. She's a plant-based athlete who has done amazing in her athletics. So you definitely can gain weight if, you don't have to lose too much weight by eating a plant-based diet. There's a way to keep the weight on if you're somebody who is struggling with getting too thin. So I just wanted to share that.
Sarah mentioned your lasagna recipe sounds great, but my adult son has become sensitive to soy, so it won't work for him. Do you have a workaround for that?
Oh, you've tripped me up with that question. I don't off the top of my head. You could probably do something with like a cashew cream, but the bulk of that tofu ricotta is tofu. So I'm sure there are other plant-based lasagna recipes online if you look for it. And if you want to email me, I'd be happy to help you figure that out. I don't have one off the top of my head. I'm sorry. But my email address is in the chat, as is my website. Somebody asked about my website. It's on the slide here. I'm leaving that up, but also in the chat. And it's really wellness-empowered.org. And I always say, don't forget the dash. You need wellness-empowered.org.
And we've just got two more here, and we're bumping up against that 7:30 mark.
Yep.
Kat mentioned yoga twisting poses help digestion, and I've got to believe that would work.
Yep. I would agree.
And Jill mentioned, does intermittent fasting work with the whole food plant-based diet?
Short answer to that question is yes, right?
Yep.
Yep. Yeah, and there's certainly nuances of how to do intermittent fasting, plant-based or otherwise, but that is definitely something that I work on with my clients in the coaching situation. So, and yeah, good point about the twisting poses. Also, like laying on your stomach sometimes can help people with digestion and stuff, but again, without knowing all the details, hard to answer all the questions.
So Michele, thank you so much. This was outstanding. As a quick reminder to everybody, our next monthly meeting will be Thursday, January 11th. Our speaker will be cancer survivor and registered dietitian Allison Tierney. If you'd like to receive notice of this or other upcoming PB Now events and are not currently on the list, just Google us at pbnow.org. Once you're on our homepage, click the white button to register and you'll begin to receive our notices. Also, remember, if you'd like to check out our past meetings, and I'd say probably a week from now to check out this again, you can go to YouTube and just type in PBNOW or pbnow.org and go and pull up videos of the meetings and watch entire talks or just skim through to the parts that you have an interest in. Thanks again to our speakers tonight, Dr. Liberman and Michele Stamn, for sharing their valuable time and knowledge with us. And thanks to all of you for coming tonight. Good night.
Thank you for having me. Thanks for listening, you guys. Have a great night.